Our fifth subcortical infertentorial structure is the thalamus. A lot of people think of this largely as a relay station. A lot of the motor inputs have to move through here and sensory inputs move through here. Keep in mind that the one sensory modality that does not move through the thalamus is the olfactory sense. So there's a lot going on in the thalamus, right? It looks just like one big old blob, but it really is broken up into several smaller components, each of which has a very specific and particular role to play. So we'll be looking at the anterior part, the ventral anterior part, the ventral posterior parts, the medial and lateral perspective, and then the geniculate nuclei. So the anterior, I just remember that this is next to, if you know your anatomy or geography of the brain, we can see that the anterior nucleus here is next to the fornix, the hippocampus, mammillary body, and amygdala. So it should be no surprise that this plays a role in memory if you can remember and recognize that. The ventral anterior, so one dumb way you can think of this is like the VA, it's a government institution, the Department of Motor Vehicles, government institution. And so this has to do with the motor functionality of a person. You can also remember that it's next to the basal ganglia, right? This ventral anterior is right next to this, the lentiform nucleus, specifically the globus pallidus internus. It's directly adjacent. Also, if we think about like precentral, so once you're above the spinal cord and the lower medulla, we start to see motor things push towards the anterior and sensory things push towards the posterior, right? Just think of the precentral gyrus in the anterior side of the frontal lobe and the postcentral gyrus posterior in the parietal lobe. And it might help you remember that because this is in the anterior portion, this has to do with movement. And then quite the reverse here with the sensory part. This is in the posterior aspect, is the ventral posterior. And so this is postcentral gyrus associated. And so it's going to be sensory modalities. Medial has to do with the face. Some people think of M for makeup and then like L lateral for limbs. And then sometimes if you have like an infarction of the PCA that fuels the posterior aspect of the thalamus, you might get thalamic syndrome where you have associated pain after the stroke has subsided. Then we have the lateral geniculate nucleus and the medial geniculate nucleus. I think of L for light. You can also, and this is going to ultimately transmit things from the optic nerve to the superior colliculi. I think of S for sight. You can also remember of the superior colliculi is above the inferior colliculi, and the eyes are above the ears. So superior colliculi is for the eyes, and then the inferior one is for below for the ears. And this is going to come from the auditory cortex via the medial geniculate nucleus to the inferior colliculi. So you can think of M for music. So here I have a picture just of the vision pathway, which is probably the more important one. So we're going to be starting with the optic nerve, the optic tract. So this is the optic chiasm, and then let's just follow this. And go. All right, to the lateral geniculate nucleus from the optic tract, into the superior colliculi, just to contrast this now, showing the inferior colliculi.